Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. I'm here today with a whole mishmash of random discussion about the books I've read recently, the books I'm planning to read, a few videos I really appreciated, and some assorted other topics, one of which I'll start out with. It's been kind of a difficult week for me. Nothing bad happened, but I've been unproductive, even when I worked hard, scatterbrained, and honestly, a bit sad for no reason. Perhaps that's the reason why I almost cried when I received a couple of really beautiful comments from a bookish friend this week. And then this absolutely unbelievable list crossed my desk. A short list of books about race and equity that was published online recently. The New Jim Crow, Just Mercy, White Fragility, Me and White Supremacy, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Unspeakable, the Story of Junius Wilson, Blackness and Disability, and Between the World and Me. 6 of those books are, of course, unbelievably widely read right now. Unspeakable? Well, it hasn't been spoken about a whole lot over the nearly 13 years since it was first published. An academic book published by a university press. My brilliant friend Susan Birch and I co-wrote the book, a study of a deaf black man living in the Jim Crow South who was wrongly accused of a crime, sent to a, quote, insane asylum as punishment, even though he was never found guilty and he was never deemed insane, castrated by the physicians of the asylum, and then institutionalized for more than 7 decades, until a social worker fought for his release in 1990. The book is about race, about disability and deafness, about the prejudicial workings of both the justice system and the healthcare system. Since we wrote it, intersectional approaches to the history of racism have certainly become more prominent, and of course the discussion of the miscarriage of justice again and again in Wilson's life feels very timely right now. Still, I was flabbergasted when I saw it on the list, and I still am, even though I've since learned that our book made it on to a fair number of other somewhat similar lists. None are quite this extreme. There is very little in my professional life that I am more proud of than our work on this project, and I'm thrilled to see it get just a bit of recognition, and mostly to see the complex story of Junius Wilson be considered as an example in our culture's dialogue about race and justice. Well, in addition to gloating, I've been spending some time reading. But just a warning, I don't plan to talk about the books I'll mention in this video in any detail, just give you a glimpse at the general shape of what I read in July and what I plan to read in August. First, July. Of course, the major event of the month for me, and for so many of you, was Jane Austen July, hosted by Marissa at Blatantly Bookish and Katie at Books and Things. For the most important reading prompt, I read one of my very favorite of Austen's novels, one that's been a favorite since I was a young teenager, Emma. There have been some wonderful discussions about Emma and other Austen novels this month, and I don't think I have anything particularly insightful to add to all the videos about the book that Jane Austen July inspired. I'll just say that I loved it yet again, and that I really appreciated the comments I received and how they helped me open my thinking a bit as I embarked on the reread, especially the comments by Roz at Skyly about the books and Brian at Bookish. And also to Lautrec's thoughtful comment about Lady Susan, which I have not yet reread but have been convinced I should try again. I also enjoyed, but did not love, 2 of the nonfiction books about Austen that I read. Lucy Worsley's biography, At Home with Jane Austen, and John Mullan's collection of short pieces, What Matters in Jane Austen. I talked just a bit about Worsley's book in a Friday Reads video early in the month, I think, when I had just started it, and I commented on Worsley's casual, chatty tone. I appreciated the social context that Worsley brings to her biography, but I wasn't blown away by the author's general narrative or her argumentation. Literary biographies and literary group biographies are definitely one of my personal favorite genres. But this book, while fine, will not be going on my favorites list. I've mentioned before that when I've heard great things about a book, I often find myself a bit disappointed when I actually read it. No matter how good a book is, I expect it to be better. And perhaps that's what's going on here, both with the Worsley and the John Mullan book. Interestingly, after I read Mullan and started thinking about why I was disappointed, I watched Tilly talking about her critique of Mullan over on her channel Tilly's Shelf, a video that echoes everything I had come up with and then goes far further. Really well thought out. Tilly and her mother Roz, of Scally Danling fame, together put out a marvelous discussion centered on Jill Hornsby's Miss Austen, a book I hope to read next July, but incorporating information from both Worsley and Mullan. I love how they tie together some of what they read this month. And don't miss the family get-together, including Steve, the dad in the family, where they talk about their familial love for Jane Austen. Absolutely wonderful. I'll leave links to all 3 videos. Finally, I read a bit of Boswell's Life of Johnson. Boswell's book meets one of the prompts for Jane Austen July to read an author who was a contemporary of Austen's, as Boswell was, more or less. Jane Austen was also a big fan of the writings of Samuel Johnson, apparently, and at some point I really want to sit down and consider how Johnson's approach helped shape Austen's writing, as well as how the other side, the Romantics, shaped her writing. I think that might be a project for next July. Thanks to host Matthew at Mayberry Books and Steve Donoghue for getting this started, and also to Ami at the channel Ami1649 for his wonderful videos about this book. I've only made it through a bit of the book so far, and I'm really enjoying just dipping my toes in whenever I have a few minutes, so I can imagine I'll be reading it for at least a few more months. The one non-Austen related book I had on my TBR for July was Toni Morrison's novel Jazz. Along with many other booktubers, some with channels and some who are just active viewers, I've signed up to read one Morrison novel per month during the year 2020, using the hashtag ToniMorrison2020 to tag our related posts. I'm afraid I didn't get to her book Jazz last month, so I'll be reading both it and the following novel, Paradise, during August. I realize I haven't put up a serious discussion of Beloved yet either. Perhaps I'll put up a single video about all 3 together, since Morrison considered them something of a loose set. We'll see. So let's turn to what is happening in August. I'm especially excited about this year's Faulkner in August, hosted by Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics, Brian at Bookish, and Una and Crypto at the Codex Cantina. This year they are reading The Sound and the Fury, my favorite Faulkner. Those of us who are participating are reading 1 section per week. Right now, a lot of folks are putting up videos on the Benji chapter, the first, mind-swimmingly difficult first section. I think I may not be putting up a full video on Faulkner until near the end of the book, but I must say I'm appreciating The Sound and the Fury even more than I have in the past. It's definitely a book that repays rereading, a general topic I'm looking forward to discussing this coming week. One more thing on Faulkner. Although I'm reading the text of The Sound of the Fury, I did listen to an hour or so of the audiobook as well, and it worked surprisingly well. Faulkner is, of course, from a storytelling culture, and this book is very much aware of sound, not surprisingly given the title, and the audiobook makes it easy to let the confusing narrative in the first section wash over you. Don't turn to the audio first. But if you're new to the book and you're finding yourself too wrapped up in trying desperately to figure out what is going on, you might try listening for a while. This is not advice I would normally give. but Faulkner is always an exception to almost every rule. In addition to the Faulkner novel and the Flannery O'Connor story I discussed at the beginning of the month, as several booktubers and I marked the anniversary of the day she died, I'm planning to read other Southern literature, especially nonfiction works about white Southern authors and the way they wrote about race. For the first time, I've written to publishers, one commercial press and 2 university presses, to ask for review copies, and I've been very lucky with their positive responses. I'll show you all the books when they start arriving and I start reading. I think I might try writing a formal essay about the topic, and if so, I will definitely share all the details with you. As you might guess, those books are not going to be light reading. But if you still have some space on your August TBR, let me steer you to a brilliant idea proposed by Courtney Ferreter, America's Jewish mother. She's planning to read Faulkner this month too, but using the title of one of the author's other novels, she created the hashtag Light in August to point out that she plans to read some lighter works to celebrate these late summer days. Sounds ideal. And actually, I have read one very light book, Becoming Duchess Goldblatt by Anonymous. I'll try to put up a discussion of it early this week. If I can make time, I'm also hoping to participate in the History Challenge, led by Jenny at Bookish Shenanigans, Justin at Ghost Reader, Justin at Triumphal Reads, and Emma at A Cup of Books for the last 2 weeks of August. I'm not fully committed to a TBR yet, but I have a few possibilities. All 3 are brand new books, published in 2020. One is Freethinker, Sex, Suffrage, and the Extraordinary Life of Helen Hamilton Gardner by Kimberly Hamlin, about an activist who fought for women's rights to vote, pointed out the racism that underpinned the suffrage movement, and battled for an end to the double standard of sexual behavior, different for men and women. It seems like a perfect time to be reading about the practice of voting in the United States. And the next book is about voting as well, Recasting the Vote, How Women of Color Transformed the Suffrage Movement by Kathleen Cahill, a book that looks at how a multiracial group of activists tried to shape the suffrage movement into a much more inclusive movement for equal rights. Sounds fantastic. My third possibility for the month is actually related to Unspeakable, my book that I mentioned at the beginning. Judy S. Wilson grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, in the earliest decades of the 20th century, following a stunning racial massacre that shaped his life dramatically. While there have been older studies of the massacre, this new one just came out, Wilmington's Lie, The Murderous Coup of 1898 and the Rise of White Supremacy, by David Zucchino. I'm especially excited about this book because I've heard that it lays out how the port city had developed a strong multiracial community in the decades after the Civil War. A town with black-owned businesses, a fusionist government that included black aldermen and magistrates and black police officers, and a major black newspaper. And then white supremacists in the state destroyed all of that, suppressing the black vote through violent intimidation to gain back the North Carolina State House, quote, by ballot or bullet or both, and forced city officials in Wilmington to resign at gunpoint. A political insurrection sounds a little terrifying to read right now, but important. Okay, well, I have more on my list for the month than I can get through, so I should go get started. Thanks for joining me here today on Hannah's Books. See you soon.